Hi everybody and welcome to Mike's Hidden Histories. Today I'm in Trim in County Meath in the east of Ireland to tell you the story of one of the most prominent military and political figures of the 19th century who was reared near here, and his name is Arthur Wellesley. Now, better known perhaps to you as the Duke of Wellington. Now, in fact, his life story is extremely interesting, and he was born in Morrington House in Merrion Street in Dublin, which is now part of the Merrion Hotel, and that was the townhouse of the Wesley family. Their country estate was in Dangan Castle here, 3 or 4 miles outside this town of Trim, and that's where he was reared, in fact. Now, you could say of Arthur Wellesley that he was from Ireland, but not of Ireland. He certainly, at the very least, downplayed his Irish background in England. And maybe it's understandable that the aristocratic or ascendancy class here were considered British in Ireland, and they were considered Irish in Britain. Anyway, he went to school here in Trim as a young boy, because he spent most of his youth in Dangan Castle. He went to Drogheda Grammar School. He went to school in Dublin, Chelsea, and then from 1781 to 1784 in Eton. Now, his father died in 1781, and his mother brought him to Brussels, and he spent 2 or 3 years in Brussels from 1785, and he attended the French Equitation School there. So in 1787, he joins the British Army as an ensign or a lieutenant, and is assigned to the Lord Lieutenant in Ireland, 2 Lord Lieutenants in succession actually here in Ireland. And while based in Dublin, he casts eye first time ever on his future wife, Kitty Pakenham. Now, and in 1793 he proposed to her, but he wasn't considered by the family to be good enough at that time. So anyway, after 1793, he left. He was a captain at that time, and he left and he came back to Ireland with his regiment to India. Came back in Ireland in 1796. He's now a colonel, much better prospects, and he's now Sir Arthur Wellesley. So he gets married to his wife, Kitty. By all accounts, it was a very unhappy marriage. They spent a long time away from each other. They had 2 sons, however, Richard and Charles. So anyway, following his military career first, in 1796, he was a colonel, but now in 1799, he's a major general in the army, so he's making great progress. And in 1813, during the Peninsular Wars, from 1807 to 1814, he is Field Marshal. And after the Battle of Victoria at that time, he is considered a hero. In fact, it's said that he never lost any of his major battles, and he was involved in 60 battles during the course of his military career. So moving on to 1814, he's now given a title. He's the very first Duke of Wellington, and he's made ambassador to France. And now, when I go back to the Peninsular Wars, they were against the French against Napoleon. Napoleon was defeated after Peninsular War, and he was confined to the island of Elba. Now, he then escaped from the island. He returns to France, and he takes charge of the army again and the government again. And what was called 100 days now ensues. So he's in power again for 100 days. And in June 1815, the 2 guys square up to each other again, Napoleon and Wellington. And Wellington wins this battle. So now he's a hero, such a great hero, in fact, that he's giving an estate in England, in Hampshire, and he's also given the equivalent of £400,000 as well, as almost like prize money after a prize fight. So his political career, he is the chief in the 1828. He is the chief of staff of the army. He resigns that for political reasons, but he's assigned that job again in 1840s, and until his death in 1852. But going back now to his political life, because I find that very interesting. In the Irish Parliament, he was an MP, but subsequently he was elected to the House of Commons, to the British Parliament, and served there with an illustrious career, elected for the Isle of Wight, elected for Rye as well in England, and was a very prominent figure, so much and so, in fact, that he ends up being Prime Minister between 1828 and 1830. In fact, he's the first Irishman ever to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, of Great Britain and Ireland. So now his views of the Irish, that he was from Ireland but not of Ireland, and many of the aristocratic class that time would have seen themselves as kind of a garrison, always under siege. Now you can understand he could little identify with a Catholic Irish-speaking population at that time. He was very suspicious of them. He considered Ireland at that time, in his earlier career, to be almost like enemy territory. But he had said at that time that, show me an Irishman and I'll show you a man whose wish is to see his country independent of Great Britain. And that's a very honest statement, actually, because the 1798 rebellion was at that time, the United Irishmen rebelled following the ideals of the French Revolution of liberty, equality and fraternity. He was a complete loyalist. His whole loyalty was to the British Crown. And so he couldn't identify at all with the millions of native Irish that lived here at that time. However, his appreciation changed over the years. In the Peninsular War, 40% of Wellington's army were actually Irish soldiers. And at the Battle of Waterloo, 30% of his army were Irish soldiers. And a number of his generals were also Irish at that time. So he changed his views. And in fact, he is quoted in the House of Commons, or the House of Lords, excuse me, in 1828. And he said, it was to Irish Catholics soldiers that we all owe our proud prominence in our military careers. Now, during that time, he was the supporter, the main driver of Catholic emancipation with the Catholic Relief Act. We all know it's Daniel O'Connell drove a campaign for this, but in fact, without the Arthur Wesley, the Duke of Wellington support, it would have gone nowhere at that time. Let me explain. Daniel O'Connell was elected in a by-election in County Clare in 1828, but he couldn't go to Parliament. Catholics were forbidden from Parliament. His fellow Irishman, coming from a different corner, however, he saw the folly of this, that, to buy peace in Ireland, you certainly have to give emancipation, give them their human rights, allow Catholics enter Parliament. So he promoted this in campaign. He campaigned for this, and he supported the bill. He had terrible opposition from all parties, including his own party, in fact. And even from the general public. His house was attacked. He was booed in public appearances. But he wasn't called the Iron Duke for nothing. He stuck to his gun. He was a champion then of Catholic emancipation. Now, there's a phrase that is often described to him that, being born in a stable doesn't make a man a horse. He didn't say that at all, in fact. That contemporary reports now make it very clear that it was Daniel O'Connell who said that on the 1st of October 1843, after one of his famous monster meetings in Ireland, and these were campaigning for the repeal of the Act of Union. But this one was in 1843 in Mullamast in County Kildare. And afterwards he said about the Duke of Wellington, the poor old Duke, what shall I say of him? To be sure he was born in Ireland, but being born in a stable does not make a man a horse. It wasn't just the aristocratic class, for example, that paid for this monument like this one here. Actually, a lot of the Catholics did, in appreciation of Arthur Wesley's or the Duke of Wellington's campaign and personal courage in campaigning for Catholic emancipation. So Dan Mulhall, the former ambassador to London, the Irish ambassador to London, actually, in an article makes claims that perhaps both the Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wesley, and Daniel O'Connell were two of the greatest Irishmen of the 19th century. So there's briefly the story of the Duke of Wellington. He died in September 1852, and his tomb is in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. That's all from Mike's Hidden History. More next time.